Hello, world, and welcome to Collider TV, where we chat with the tech innovators driving the next generation of digital business solutions.
Today, we're talking about digital transformation for social good with entrepreneur Chris Powers. But before we get into it with Chris, let's tell them a bit about ourselves, right?
Well, my name is Ryan.
And I'm Jacob.
And together, we run Collider, which is a community of digital business leaders who connect and explore innovative solutions. And we would love for you to join the conversation, please, by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to learn more about how to get involved with us, please check out collider.altimetric.com.
And Collider is powered by Altimetric, which is a leading digital business enablement company creating solutions that drive transformation and achieve business outcomes for clients all over the globe. So if your company is looking to get unstuck and take your digital strategy to the next level, please do let us know. And we are also growing very quickly. So if you're looking for your next career opportunity, also don't hesitate to reach out.
Let's dive into today's conversation. Chris, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, thank you. So we are joined today by Chris Powers, who is the co-founder of Reciprocity, on a mission to make nonprofit programs and resources more accessible. He is also an active contributor to our Collider community.
Absolutely.
Chris Powers, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I've always enjoyed sort of the Collider events, so it's fun to be able to speak with both of you one-on-one. Yeah, a little about me. I'm an entrepreneur from Southeast Michigan, co-founder of Reciprocity app. But as a co-founder of Reciprocity, we're working to connect people with essential resources using technology.
Got it. So how did you get involved with Reciprocity?
Yeah, sort of by accident. I was on sabbatical when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. So everything ground to a halt. Everyone was going into lockdown. And one of my best and oldest college friends from Oakland University, Cameron Underdown, launched this little website called mycovidresponse.org. And I had been sort of freaking out about the pandemic a month before because I heard about everything that was happening from my friends who were living in China. So I gave him a call and just said, hey, like, you know, whatever I can do to help you, let me know. I'm here for it. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the launch of that website, we had several thousand volunteers who ended up signing up and several thousand people who signed up requesting some type of help, whether it be food assistance, housing assistance, employment assistance. And so the whole thing really kind of scaled up a lot quicker than we expected. And we ended up launching a disaster food program on the floor of Oakland University in partnership with Pontiac Community Foundation, faculty professor at OU, Jennifer Lucarelli, and Lighthouse of Michigan. And we just had a bunch of people packing food boxes and loading them into people's trunks. And then that program since has gone on to serve over 15,000 people, and we've coordinated somewhere in the neighborhood of 85,000 food deliveries. So that program is now being professionally run by Lighthouse. And what we found during the pandemic was that a lot of our sort of most critical institutions were caught flat-footed and weren't really prepared to do things in this like remote first world. So we started Reciprocity to help bring technology solutions to connect the organizations that are providing some type of service and the people in need who needed help.
It's incredible that your orientation was technology. I feel like for a lot of I think at least stereotypically, the nonprofit sector can be known for being a bit slow moving on the technology front, maybe a bit, outdated, not quite as tech savvy as the for-profit sector. So it's really interesting to me that you jump straight to technology. I'm curious, like where did you get that passion for using? Where did you get that idea, that passion for using technology to address social challenges? Like where did that energy come from?
I actually studied engineering as my undergrad, so I've always kind of been sort of like a systems thinker, and then did a corporate rotation program. So I got kind of a high level view of how like corporations and businesses operated. And my feeling is that a lot of our greatest challenges that we face are sort of our greatest opportunities to use technology for good, whether that be on the social front, healthcare, environmental issues, climate change, et cetera. And so I've just always kind of had this inclination that technology is a really great point of leverage if we want to, fix challenges at a high level.
That's fantastic. And so the topic of today's conversation is digital transformation for social good. So playing off of what you just said, setting some context as we dive in here in more detail, from your perspective, what exactly is digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm sure that you all have a lot of great case studies with the work that you do. From our perspective, digital transformation usually takes the form of making sort of paper forms into some type of online form so that folks can just make data more readily accessible. But in general, where we start is that we think about what are an organization's goals, and then building backwards to how to use data in order to accomplish those goals. And so I think there's a lot of different specific examples that we could discuss, but that's kind of how I view it.
So then, like obstacles that may occur, are there common challenges that you see for nonprofit organizations in this endeavor, or are there not common challenges?
There are both common and uncommon challenges in the nonprofit sector. I'm sure anyone listening at home, if you either work for or volunteer with a nonprofit, you probably have seen all kinds of unique challenges happen every day. And so, for that, for solving those, I commend you. The things that we see a lot is we typically get involved in one of two places. Either we get involved if a nonprofit organization is looking to update their web presence, or if they're at a point where they're sort of overwhelmed or overburdened by the amount of information that they have to manage. So something we run into a lot is either an executive director or a program manager is hunched over a spreadsheet at 10 p.m. They can't keep up with the amount of intake that they have. They can't keep up with the number of phone calls they have. Doing things like grant reporting or any kind of reporting or any kind of data analysis feels like just another thing that they have to do. And because a lot of nonprofits use legacy systems that are offline or don't talk to each other, and because some of them use paper forms, some of them use offline databases, it's really hard to get the information from the point of intake to where you want it to go. So I would just say that the biggest challenge that we see is that the administrative work required to run a nonprofit or service program grows faster than the organization's ability to hire people to manage that paperwork.
I can imagine there's lots of well-intentioned organizations with very noble missions that are just so bogged down that it prevents them from being able to achieve the level of social impact that they're looking to achieve, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting. So given the fact that there's kind of that extra dimension of a nonprofit both managing expenses and also that the social mission, I guess what types of similarities or differences, how would you compare that to digital transformation as it's kind of traditionally viewed in the for-profit world? You mentioned being able to drive more efficient outcomes using data, for example. I know that's very top of mind in for-profit sector. I'm curious, what other types of how would you compare them?
Yeah, so I think nonprofits and for-profits are a lot more similar than people often recognize. So in a for-profit business, you're trying to maximize the bottom line, or you're trying to maximize sort of the wealth of the shareholders or stakeholders of that organization. But to do that, you have you have money, you have processes, you have systems, you have labor, and you have some kind of technology as inputs, and then the output ends up being money, hopefully, if the business is thriving. Nonprofits are very similar, is that they have inputs of data, labor, money, maybe volunteer resources, and then the output is some type of a social good. And so I think the nonprofit sector has been sort of overlooked or neglected by a lot of technology companies, but it is still a really huge sector of the economy. And it is still an area where I think that we just need to bring sort of better innovation and tools to the table in order to help folks to, serve their communities and achieve their mission. So I think they're one and the same, honestly, nonprofit and for-profit transformations.
Super interesting.
Got it. And in this transformation, though, I assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are, people or just practices that are resistant, and you see resistance. Are there specific points of resistance that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unique challenges in the nonprofit sector. So we see a few things. The first is I think a lot of folks in the nonprofit world have been burned by technology before. So we hear a lot of stories of folks that are like, we were promised something and we contributed money to it, and then it ended up just being vaporware, or the developers weren't able to deliver on what they promised, or we were sold something but then it really wasn't the right fit for our organization, or or this thing was really great for us 10 years ago, but now it's not really working out. And I think that's sort of the first set of challenges is just organizations that are not really set up to serve the nonprofit sector. I think the second is that because the people who are in nonprofits, human service, and sort of public-facing institutions have to work extremely hard just to keep the lights on and just to keep things going. And a lot of times messing around with a new tech thing just feels like another thing that they have to do at the end of the day. So one of the things that we face very often is folks who are very hesitant, and they say, like, I don't know about this, like, newfangled computer thing that you guys are trying to do. So then we really try to meet those clients where they are at their level of technical proficiency and help them kind of build the confidence and the skills, and also build sort of products and systems that are easy enough to use so that they can feel really good about using a tool to help them do their job better, versus like having it just be like a compliance tool or a reporting tool or like just another thing that they have to do at the end of the day.
That makes a ton of sense. And I know that the kind of like culture shift aspect of driving change management, I know is a big component of driving digital transformation on the for-profit side as well. So that tracks, that makes sense. One follow-up question, just because I'm curious, is like within these organizations, you mentioned just kind of the kind of lower average technical expertise, I'll say something like that. Do you find that there are folks that exist within, obviously I'm sure it depends on the organization, but are there folks working within the nonprofit sector that are technology oriented? And we can get into this in a bit more detail kind of at the end, but like, is that an increasing trend that you see, that folks that have technology backgrounds are looking to lend that expertise in kind of these less traditional ways?
Yeah, I would say slowly but steadily. What we find most often is that we end up designing a system or a solution that's kind of so easy to use that someone who is maybe not that tech savvy ends up becoming sort of like the resident tech guru. So a lot of times they feel really good about being able to level up their own professional or personal computer skills. And then they're like, oh, hey, I can do this. Like I can start to think like a developer. I can start to think like an engineer, and I can start to do a lot more than I did previously. We do find some folks who are a little more on the tech savvy side who end up, joining some of these organizations, but usually that ends up happening once the transformation has sort of begun to take place. So if we do install some type of a system, then the organization then has a need for someone who's a little more technical. And then that also kind of is a virtuous cycle from kind of like the internal organizational level.
So what would you say is, speaking to kind of, so we've established what the challenges look like kind of usually. Now kind of transitioning to speaking on the what the solutions look like and how you arrive there. So what would you say is the process that you go through with a given client for assessing their needs, like you were describing, and putting together a plan for the transformation?
Yeah, really what I end up doing is using a lot of the same skills that I used in sort of my corporate sales role in kind of a past life, where we'll start by asking about what is an organization's goal. So what is kind of the intended desired outcome for their program, and what do they as an organization and then at a program level want to achieve. And then once we understand that outcome, we'll ask a lot of different questions about all of the kind of business processes, systems, current or past technology tools that they use. And by systems, we would even still consider like a clipboard or somebody who knows somebody, or someone has a laminated piece of paper on their desk. Like, even if that doesn't sound like an engineering system, it is a business system or business process. And so we just take a complete inventory as much as we can about everywhere and every way that organization is storing, moving, or processing data, and just kind of do a top to bottom assessment. Usually that takes a couple of hours to really kind of sift through. And then very often, what we've been doing is that we'll give them sort of like a very simple web application. So some kind of a website front end attached to a database with an API in between that handles a lot of the business logic of their program.
Wow. So even like, let's take an even deeper dive. Can you explain some of the specific examples that you're working on with clients currently?
Yeah, I can give a few, maybe a few case studies or a few examples. So when we started My COVID Response, it was a very simple kind of give help, get help portal where we would have people in need sign up and people who could help sign up, and then we would sort of just connect them together. So that was just a basic WordPress site connected to Airtable with some custom scripts on the back end to make all of it run. We're actually upgrading that system to have sort of a proper database and a React front end to make it a little more robust and scalable and a lot more responsive and quicker, and less prone to just sort of breaking down randomly when one of 20 plugins sort of ends up getting updated. We work with a few other organizations where we'll have sort of a simple intake form, typically on a WordPress website. And then, so I'm trying to think of a good example. One example is there's an educational nonprofit that we've worked with that offers online courses. And they did a lot of their stuff through Google Classroom and through online, but their back office was kind of a mess. So they had to manually update all of the registration and payment info on a spreadsheet. And by simply sort of automating that intake and all of the registration info, so like whenever a student or a parent pays for a class or graduates or attends a class, their data within the system would change. So we saved the administrators of that program around 20 hours per week of just spreadsheet work. We've also done a few holiday programs. So we've helped Lighthouse with Thanksgiving and Adopt a Family, like sort of Christmas gift giving programs where we sort of match participants with donors. And so a lot of the administration of that is just handled through like a database essentially. I'm trying to think of a few other good examples. I would say just in general, the form that our projects take is organization X wants to get resource Y to group of people or population Z. And what we do is just build a website so that people can interact with that program. And then all of the data gathering, processing, and management sort of just happens on the back end through a database. And we try to set up that system so that it's sort of what you see is what you get. And so the people who are administering it can really very easily click on and find the information they need. So like we'll set up a lot of filters, views, and just kind of reporting dashboards and things like that, just so that the folks who are on the back end don't need to do a lot of really heavy lifting.
Got it. So you've mentioned reporting dashboards. You mentioned, APIs connecting, digitizing data sets connected with APIs that can, talk to each other more efficiently. We talk and hear a lot about single source of truth is a term that we explore a lot. So I'm hoping that you could just dive more specifically into that piece. So what exactly does single source of truth mean in the context of the work that you do?
Yeah, for us, single source of truth is having one record of note that pertains to any kind of service that someone ends up getting connected to. And so for a lot of organizations that we work with, they have, sometimes a few, but sometimes over a dozen different places where participant info or where data might live. And so, our first goal is to kind of try to bring that all under one roof and all into one place so that all of the different systems that manage data end up talking to each other. And so, in the COVID response days when we were sort of doing food delivery, a single source of truth or a record of note looked like, a volunteer helped a person on this date and this time with this thing. So it's like, Johnny delivered food to Susie on, April 14th. And just keeping all those records just allows for much easier reporting too, because then if an organization ever gets audited or they ever need to know what happened in the past, they can just search or process a report much more easily when the record of note is online versus offline. So a lot of organizations that have the record of note in a filing cabinet are unable to very quickly find that information.
So great. That's actually great. So then can you dive into the results that you are actually witnessing?
Yeah, we've really seen a remarkable transformation with some of the organizations that we've worked with. So a lot of feedback that we get from program managers or executive directors are things like, maybe they were feeling kind of burned out or overwhelmed with the amount of paperwork that they had. And if we can sort of automate a lot of that away, then they spend less time in the back office and more time with the people they're trying to serve, or more time sort of raising money for their cause. When we make sort of the reporting side of things easier, it makes grants a lot easier to unlock. So some of the organizations we've partnered with have seen an increase in financial success. And there's also sort of an interesting employee satisfaction piece that we've seen where maybe a person's job ends up being like boring or repetitive because they're always juggling a lot of the same kind of paperwork. But then when we take that burden off them and turn them into more of a sort of tech guru for their organization, then they feel a lot more engaged because some of the feedback we've received is that they feel like they're learning new things and like they're able to kind of move their career forward. And they feel like rather than just being burdened and overwhelmed, now they're able to get a little more on top of their job and they're able to sort of do what it is they set out to do coming into this line of work, which is helping more people. So just in general, we find we've heard that there's an administrative savings, so anywhere from like maybe 10 to 20 hours per person per week, to, hey, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm going to stick around for the long run. And we feel like we're actually making a difference versus just being sort of really overwhelmed.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah, way to lighten the load.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like I met you, somebody who's working. You're working at a nonprofit organization to make an impact, almost certainly. And if you're bogged down by doing paperwork the whole time, I can imagine that would be very deflating. In addition to the fact that you're not having the impact that you're looking to make. So that's incredible. I'm curious to know, given what you're describing on the results side and how exciting those results sound, these kind of early results, could you fill us in on kind of what is the longer term vision? I think you've alluded in previous conversations we've had to kind of this vision of combining data in a meaningful way, like creating some sort of shared data set that folks can tap into and drive efficiency between organizations with synergistic missions or something like that. Could you dive into that a bit?
Yeah, we have a lot of different projects and initiatives going on that front. So as it relates to our my COVID response work, we're working with a professor at Oakland University, Jennifer Lucarelli, who is really analyzing a lot of the data from the last 2 years of the program in order to see how the sort of parent organization Lighthouse can improve program outcomes from a public health perspective, but also thinking through how can they use that data to feed back into making their program better year after year. So it allows a program to kind of have a little more of a continuous improvement approach based on academic research and based on data. With a lot of the other organizations that we're working with, we're sort of just bootstrapping by putting one program online after another. And what I mean by that is if a nonprofit or community organization has a resource that they want to share with the community, we help to build a website around it and put online so that people can much more easily connect with it. In the longer run, our vision is to create what we call a community resource exchange, which is where, if you imagine, once we have enough sort of nonprofit programs that are online native, then we can start to use a single sign-on. So one application could give a person access to all of the different programs that are in the network. And as you can imagine, like any other kind of network effects business, the more programs that end up signing up and the more people that end up signing up, the more connections we can make between people and programs, and the more that we can sort of continue to improve the local safety net by just connecting people with resources. So in the long run, if we're successful, what I imagine is sort of like an application on my phone where I can fill out paperwork one time and then figure out all of the different things that we qualify for. That is what we're sort of working to pilot in 2022, which is actually like a proper platform-based approach to bringing all these things together.
That's incredible. First of all, just kudos for even having the vision to think like that. It sounds so exciting. I want to zero in on an additional aspect of that. Like from the metrics and reporting standpoint, I suspect that if I was a public policy maker or a grant maker or a foundation of some sort, like I imagine that this type of resource would be extremely valuable, not only for the end user, the individual receiving help, but also for the organizations that are providing that, the funding structure or the policy structure. How might that all play together? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are almost certainly people who are much better qualified to answer that than I am. I think, we're seeing sort of a shift in some foundations and some sort of government funded programs having stricter or more robust reporting requirements. And so, we believe in the long run, eventually organizations will need to demonstrate that they're actually having their stated impact. and that the organizations that can provide proof that they're having an impact are going to get access to more funding. And then the organizations that are unable to demonstrate that will probably have a harder time in the future. But I think it's still a little early, at least for us to tell. I'm sure there's someone out there, and if you are out there, I'd love to have a conversation and learn more.
Yeah, I have a bit of experience on the nonprofit grant making side of the equation, like applying for grants, and I could tell, and then following up with reporting. And I can tell you that if I had better processes for streamlining those efforts, it would have meant that I could apply for more grants. It would have meant that I would have been more likely to get re-upped on those grants, all those types of things. So I hear you loud and clear. This type of thinking would have saved me a lot of time. And yeah, it's really exciting that you all are out here doing that.
Yeah, how do you get more people out here? Like if somebody who is interested in a career in technology, but I guess that just maybe haven't considered working in the nonprofit sector or public sector, how would you say, come on, get involved? How could they go about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I sort of left behind the world of careerism for the weird world of startups. And so I might not be the best person to talk to about like career development.
That's one option, do your job and start something.
Yeah, I would say that if you're looking to do it professionally, it can be really hard. So, for a lot of the reasons that we discussed earlier, there are a lot of barriers to technology adoption in sort of the nonprofit sector. And so I think that we've been able to do a lot of good work, but it's definitely been an uphill climb. And what I would say is that if you're someone who's deeply passionate about the work, and if you feel like you have a point of view and you need to change the world for the better, and that's just the kind of person you are, you know that about yourself. And I think you're probably just going to end up doing it no matter what. That's sort of what we did. We didn't ask for permission. We just kind of said, hey, here's a problem. We want to try to solve it. One of the advantages of the nonprofit sector is that you can end up volunteering, and a lot of nonprofits need more help than they have resources to sort of accomplish, or they need more help than they have. And so if you're sort of a technically minded person, a lot of times you can just sort of show up and help build a system or help, a nonprofit to do something. One of the things I would say for anyone who's younger in their career or looking to make any type of career transition is that a lot of times working with nonprofits gives you exposure to really sort of high level people, and gives you exposure to work on problems that might otherwise be way above your pay grade in the corporate world. And so, I've had a lot of great opportunities. Like when I lived back in Chicago, I got to volunteer at a lot of environmental nonprofits and get my hands into a lot of different things and learn and grow in ways that weren't really afforded to me at my day job at the time. So I would say if there's a social cause that you care about or something that you're interested in, I would just say, go to the organization, become a volunteer, understand what the challenges that they face day to day are, and then try to use your unique skills and expertise to get involved and to help out.
That's super interesting. I think a lot of people, just to, anecdotally, in my experience, when folks think about volunteering or getting involved with a social mission, I think people think of like the kind of like grind, the manual labor side of like sorting food at a food kitchen or, at a soup kitchen or something, or, physically, delivering services or something like that. I think often we overlook the opportunity to leverage our unique individual skills, whether that be technical skills or if you're a designer, if you're a UX designer, offering those skills. If you're, so I feel like that's just a really good advice in general for folks is, if you're passionate about a cause, think about what unique skills you bring to the table that could, add the most value in that context, including technology skills. And then I love what you were saying about kind of the like, it's almost like an opportunity as a technologist, to make an outsized splash, to be a big fish in a smaller pond, where you can step into an organization, like you said, even somebody who isn't explicitly technical in some cases, where in the work you're doing, that person becomes the localized, tech guru. So I can only imagine somebody who is coming in with an engineering degree or experience in that regard. I could imagine you could have a fast, outsized impact in that sense, working on some really meaningful and interesting challenges. So that's really a really beautiful perspective. So I think you touched on this a little bit, but just curious to know, so for folks that are listening on the flip side of this, so folks that are maybe running a nonprofit organization or in a position of decision-making at a nonprofit, what advice or how would you recommend from that perspective even approaching this type of solution? So obviously you can call reciprocity. We'll get into it in a second, but how would you recommend that folks bring this up at a board meeting or raise this point internally within an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I think the biggest thing to realize is if you're feeling sort of like overwhelmed or burned out, or there's too much paperwork in too many different spots to manage, and it's creating problems within your organization, whether you realize it or not. A lot of times people have a tendency to just do things the way they've always been done because that's the way they do them. But all business process is arbitrary. So you could do it differently tomorrow if you really wanted to. And it doesn't have to be so onerous. It doesn't have to be so boring. It doesn't have to consume so much of your life. And what we find a lot of times is that the folks who are in the nonprofit industry are not paperwork people, they're people, and they want to be out kind of in the community and serving. And so I would just say if you feel like something is broken at your organization, you can be sort of like an entrepreneur, and you can really change how things work if you are willing to sort of take some risk and you're willing to think outside the box. So I would just encourage folks to, if something doesn't feel right or if something feels broken or onerous, then put it under a microscope and brainstorm how you can change it.
Mhm.
And I think these kind of case studies that you're describing as well, I think like bringing specific examples of other organizations that have successfully implemented these types of changes, I imagine would boost that pitch. That makes a ton of sense, and I think that's really fantastic advice. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. This is a really insightful perspective. We really appreciate not only you sharing your perspective in this regard, but all of the wonderful insights that you provide to the Collider community. So I'm just curious to know, folks looking to get in touch, what's the best way to find you, connect with you, connect with your services? How can folks at home find you?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is at reciprocityapps.org. We can drop some links in the show notes, but we have, sort of like a contact page. If you want to submit a project idea, we have a project page. So I think that's really kind of universally the best way to get in touch. I'll also drop sort of probably my different social profiles and, contact information as well.
Perfect. So we'll have not only reciprocityapps.org, but we'll have Chris's social media contact information in the description for this video here. And then, more generally, like what is, so aside from maybe like referring, organizations or something like that, like what is the best way for listeners, folks tuning in, to support the incredible work that you're doing?
Yeah, good question. If you or someone you know works at a nonprofit or service organization that's out there trying to help the community, and you're feeling sort of burdened or overwhelmed by the amount of administrative work, or you need sort of like an updated internet presence, then definitely feel free to put a time on my calendar to talk or submit a project idea for us. And I'd be happy to chat even for just an hour or so, to give you some ideas for where to start. If we're not the right people to be able to help you out, I think we could probably point you in the direction of someone who would be.
So, Chris, you've given us such awesome information. Are there any final thoughts that you want to lay on us one more time before we head out of here?
Yeah. When we started doing our disaster response work at My COVID Response, a friend of mine told me something that stuck with me, which is, in a disaster, the willing are the qualified. And I think we face a number of slow and fast moving disasters, everything from sort of the global pandemic that's still going on, to climate change, to even just local organizational disasters, things that once worked 50 or 100 years ago no longer work. And so I would say if you're willing to make a positive impact, then you probably are more qualified than you know. And I would just say if there's some type of change that you want to see in the world, or something that you think that you can make better, the best way to get started is just to dive in with both feet and go for it.
That's fantastic. We're just so excited that you're out here doing this incredible work. Really, really cool to just see what types of solutions can emerge when you apply this type of, human-centric design thinking and digital transformation thinking and all these awesome methodologies, and apply it to something so tangible and essential. These are essential services that we provide to our communities. It's really fantastic what you're doing, Chris, honestly.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for that. And I have to give the real shout out to the people who are on the ground doing sort of the work day to day, the volunteers, and the people who, stay up late at night to make sure that all of these things end up going well. We try to provide solutions that make their lives just a little bit easier, but it's really the people who run these programs, I think, that are the real heroes in the mix. So
can't say it better than that. Well,
Right.
Thank you so much, Chris, not only for the work you do, but also for sharing those insights with us. For everyone tuning in, thank you so much for checking out Collider TV. Many more exciting conversations to come. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. Check out collider.altimetric.com, and we will see you very soon.